the meeting to order at 9:03. And John, I believe you're going to do the acknowledgement of land. Do you have that? Would you go ahead and do that, please?
Welcome to our school, located on the traditional land and territory of the Niitsitapi, the Piikani Kainai, and Siksika, the Blackfoot people within the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Thank you, John. We appreciate you doing that. We'll move to emergent changes to the agenda. Is there any emergent changes to the agenda for the organizational meeting? This is not the regular board meeting, but the organizational meeting. So, seeing none, can I get a motion to move that the September 11, 2019 board organizational meeting agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented? Clara. All in favor? Carried. Okay. At this point, we'll move to the declaration of conflict of interest, that if any of the Board of Trustees declare if they have any conflicts of interest relating to the agenda items from the September 11, 2019 board organizational meeting, and if so, they should declare them. Okay, there is none. All right, we'll move on to our discussion, information, and action items all in one. So the first item of business is the Remuneration Committee and the proposal that they're bringing forward. So we'll turn that over to Mr. Burdett, Trustee Burdett, to provide a report and recommendation on that. Oh, do we need a motion first? Can I get somebody to move the motion that the Board of Trustees approve the proposed remuneration as? Okay.
Okay, somebody do that.
Okay, Mr. Burdett.
All right. So, as we went through all of this, I think the changes weren't as vast as we thought they might be. But we did make some, and they're all reflected in the red in, I think everybody's got a copy of it.
Does everybody have a copy of the board operations, or are we're putting it on the policy 8?
Policy
board
8,
operations,
yeah.
Policy 8.
So, I thought there was more red in here.
Page 7, and then the last document, page 12, is where the items have been altered.
So basically what we did is on our last recommendation, there was a part where we had a 15-kilometer thing to schools, and people were assigned to a school. They got a different, honorarium based on that extra mileage. And what we've changed is, instead of having it in the honorarium, we have moved it so that people who, all the honorariums except for the chair and vice chair will remain the same, and people who are traveling to the business inside the stuff that's covered by their honorarium will receive mileage for going there. And that way, if people have to sub for other people and things like that, then the mileage gets covered. And so that's the basics of the change. The wording of this part on page 7 gives us that wording. And what did you say the other page was?
Page 12.
All right, over here. Right on the back.
So just to clarify, that's kilometers only, but not paid for time traveled.
Right.
When you're going to those meetings.
Yeah. And so, yeah. So here's where we crossed out the assigned 15-kilometer and the added $50 per school. And we've also made a change where in the per diem honorarium, where we moved down to where there's a 2-hour payment. And I think that was mostly because we've had a couple of meetings where the whole meeting was electronic and by phone, where we were there for half an hour. And I think that more reflects, probably don't need to be paid for 4 hours when we spend half, right? So, and I believe that's the two changes. Yes.
The other change that we had discussed was taking out parent council meetings.
But we decided not to do that.
Okay. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, Lori just asked, and I was like, I think, yeah.
Yeah. We talked about that because that was brought up at our planning meeting. And from all the evidence that we had, our parent council meetings were being covered. And the other thing we had to look at was how easy is this to administrate? So the more we break it up, then the tougher we make it, the harder it is on Mr. Perry to do his job. And so the simpler it is, the better it is. So that's why we came to that decision. We felt that they were being covered, and we felt that with the mileage being changed, that it wouldn't impede them still being covered, so we left it at that.
Okay, I'll just make a real quick comment and then we'll go to Brad. One other clarification is that within the document itself, there's a line that identifies that there's an expectation that trustees attend parent council, and so it's already in the monthly honorarium.
Yeah.
So the expectation is still there, so trustees that aren't attending those things can be held accountable in other ways, but the expectation is there through the documentation as well. Brad?
Again, I think that that's a mistake not pulling that out. I know that we can hold people accountable, but when you have, it's not equitable. You have trustees that are assigned 3 school councils and trustees that are assigned 1. And so why is their enumeration the same? Previously, the $50 kind of compensated for that, but I don't think that this is equitable, and I think that we should pull it out as discussed in the committee of the whole meeting. I think that helps with that, and it also accounts. It's not arduous to have a line item that you attended a school council on a form that is all pre-populated a spreadsheet. So I don't think it creates extra work for our staff.
Okay, did I see another hand? Lacey?
Okay, I was just gonna say, I mean, we are making some changes so that, you know, no trustee is gonna be, most trustees will have 2 schools to cover. But I think that, you know, the way it is, your travel will be paid for, but when you take on a school, there's lots of things that you can attend and may need to attend, and then there's some members who need to do more prep work or less, depending on their committees and stuff, and they're not compensated differently. You don't get paid more if you're on more committees, or if your committee, you know, is doing a presentation today. I think that there are certain things that we agree to do as trustees, and part of that is being in the schools and being the eyes and ears for our superintendent, and being able to know what's going on. So that's why I feel like, you know, when we were compensated for them, they were being attended. Last year we haven't been compensated hourly for them. They're included in our honorarium, and the attendance has still been great. And so that's part of the reason in our discussion why we thought we would not change.
Okay, Clara?
I was just wondering if I understand from Brad. Brad, are you asking that the $50 be put back in there, but everything else leave the same?
I'm asking for an amendment that we do not compensate for, however that would happen, that we do not compensate for school councils. I agree that they're being covered, but not by the assigned trustees. There were to not in our monthly honorarium include school councils. We had 3 months, up to 3 months sometimes, that the assigned trustee was not covering the school council. So it's not fair to say that, yes, they're being covered off by trustees, but they're not being covered off by the assigned trustee. So the trustee who is dedicating their time and they're putting in the effort to go to those meetings should be. We've always said that we can't compensate for all the work that happens outside of meetings, all the committee work and such. But if you are physically present and going to a meeting, that should be covered and that should be paid for. That's fair and that's equitable. So I think that we should modify this to not include school councils in that monthly honorarium. Because if I'm stuck on a tractor for 2 months and I'm not attending my school councils, and Trustee McKee, my great partner in my ward, is attending that, I shouldn't be paid their honorarium.
Okay, John.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I'm in the same boat when it comes to calving season. I'm quite often very busy, and I appreciate Mr. Toon covering for me as well. I got one concern here. In our ward, like Ward 1, I don't know whether you guys have the same conditions that we have, but quite often between our two schools, which are the J.T. Foster and the Willow Creek Compton High School, most of the time, both Brad and myself partake in the graduation ceremony. Sometimes I give the address, and Brad will work on handing out the awards and performing that aspect of the graduation, and sometimes we switch around. Now, if you assign a certain school to one person, and they're the only ones who receive the per diem from that, both Brad and myself attend these graduations, and we're not just spectators there, we actually are doing some aspect of the graduation. We're part of the ceremony. And only one person there, whether it's Brad, who would receive the per diem, and it's not my assigned school, I am there on part of my honorarium. Now, and the same thing occurs when we are at, like when we switch schools, which I'm assigned to the Willow Creek Composite High School. The same thing would occur there, but in reverse. So we're both there. One person receives an honorarium, and we could be, and we're both partaking in the graduation ceremony, and the other person receives the honorarium. Now that to me is not a fair situation, and that should be, if one person there and he's getting the per diem and he's part of the graduation ceremony and the other person is there, why should he just receive the honorarium?
I can answer that.
Go ahead, Jim.
So I do believe that if you're both assigned, so if the school invites Brad, it's his school, and John, and you're both assigned duties at that graduation, that you would both be paid anyway. Because those duties would have been assigned, right? And
Well,
so,
no, because, oh, sorry.
yeah.
So,
I think, I believe that that's how that works. So if he's been invited to give an award and he's been invited to give some other awards, they will both be called to be at that graduation. That would come before the board and we would say, yes, you've both been invited to be there and participate, so then you'd both get paid.
if the board was to sign both of them, then that would be the case.
Yeah.
Typically, my understanding, just for clarification, is that the board was going to assign a trustee to each school to ensure that they attend the school councils as well as the graduation or whatever it might be for that. So we talked about that the principal cannot dictate when the trustee would be remunerated, but if the board were to assign multiple people to a school, that would be up to the board, and then it would be remunerated to both. But as I understand it, just so everybody's under the same understanding, if you're assigned to a school for whatever school you're assigned to, then you would be remunerated for participating in those things. Outside of that, if you volunteer to participate based on an invitation by the administrator, that's your choice to volunteer to participate. Right. So that's the understanding that I have as the financial person reviewing the documentation. If it's different, then the board would have to determine that. Brad. So.
Just for clarification, I would propose an amendment that the honorarium of the board chair, vice chair, and trustee be reduced by $101.70, equating to two 2-hour honorariums, averaging out that on average there's a two school council meetings a month, and that school council would be paid. So it wouldn't be a loss for the trustees. It would just be holding accountability to the meetings that are attended. So I'd put out that as an amendment.
Okay. Let's take a let's take a moment and look at what the amendment would be. So are you able to bring up another document to type in? Just so everybody has a good understanding of what's being proposed. So we currently have that the Board of Trustees approve the proposed remuneration. And then we would have to add what Brad is proposing.
Reduction
Less
of,
$101.
yeah, and 70 cents. That equates to two hours, because on average our meetings, our school council meetings are under 2 hours, and
So reduce the monthly remuneration
yeah, for all trustees.
for all trustees by $101.70. And that, carry on, Brad, what is the addition to that?
And that school councils would be covered at our regular honorarium
And
rates
I would say that and school councils be moved to the per diem
per diem. Okay,
portion of remuneration, something like that. Does that make sense?
yes, definitely.
Does everybody understand the proposed amendment to the? So that would mean that we're approving everything. Well, first we'll vote on the amendment, and then I guess we would vote on the entire original motion if it's defeated, or if not, we would vote on the revised motion. Okay? So does everybody understand anybody have any questions with regards or comments with regards to the amendment? Lori?
Just for clarification for myself, so by reducing the monthly allowance, we are then now going to be claiming for our school councils meetings? Okay.
That, Brad, that's what you
Yes,
understand it to be?
that's the intent.
Okay, Clara?
Just the school council or all the other things that we go to, like the celebrations and things like that? And I'm not talking about graduation, I'm talking about all the other celebrations that happen that we are invited to come to, and a lot of times take part in doing things.
Brad,
Is
do you wanna
that
speak?
included in there?
And I can just fall back to the discussions we had previously on the Remuneration Committee, and that's why we went to this system, because it's too hard to delineate for budgeting purposes. We know school councils are going to happen. We know we're going to attend it. We don't know what schools are going to have celebrations and when. So to be fiscally responsible, that's why it's on average, and that's why we're paid throughout the summer as well when no celebrations are happening. If you averaged it out, you'd be justly remunerated for those situations.
Any further discussion? Questions? Jim?
So I mean, I get where the thought behind moving them out, but I mean, we're talking about council meetings. I think they're being covered, and I think the simpler we keep it, the better. I believe there's some inequity now because we haven't changed our ward boundaries. When the ward boundaries change, those inequities will be gone, and people will be probably 2 schools each, pretty much everywhere. And so I just think the more complicated it gets, the harder it gets to follow, right? And that's why I would speak against that amendment. I think the way it is works well.
Okay, thank you. Lacey?
Just for
And then Greg.
clarification, often Lori and I will both go to a school council. So this would be only for schools that you are assigned to? Or if I chose to go to all 4, would I get paid for all 4, even if they aren't my assigned schools, but they're within my ward?
No, that would be correct. I've attended 6 in a month in our ward, and so really if the redundancies and trustees, they're not getting any extra benefit there. It's just for the trustee themselves being there.
Yeah.
And I would fall back again. We've had trustees, myself included, where there's stretches of time where you're not attending that, but somebody else is. It is being covered. But why wouldn't we compensate those trustees for doing that?
Okay, so do you want to clarify that in here in a way that also makes it if you go for John, you will be paid even though you're not assigned to that school, but you're going on behalf of him?
For the trustee for a single trustee representative, we could add that language in there, because I think that you don't want to just say the assigned trustee, because if the assigned trustee isn't attending, well, somebody needs to go, and we can call anyone. I've had times when I've had to go to Crow's Nest Pass because that, and you as well. And so I think that it's important that we allow for us to shoulder the whole burden as a board, because we are a board that is great at helping each other, and make sure that we're compensating each other for that help. So I don't know what the exact wording would be for that. If I would ask for some help, if anybody could come up with something to delineate that.
Well, I think we could say assigned, because when somebody can't go, then you're transferring that over to somebody else. They now become assigned, I guess, to some extent to attend that. Anybody have any wording that they think would work there? School council be moved to per diem and assigned school councils.
Yeah,
Assigned school
for
council.
just the assigned trustee, and that way it clarifies it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't have the wording, but I do want to make a point here. I think it said that when a second trustee goes to a council meeting, there's no benefit. There's a lot of benefit. They want to see the trustees there. The parents do. I think as trustees, we're elected within our wards, and we should have the right to be able to go to these, well, I mean, we can go and not get paid, but we should be able to go to these meetings if we can. I see no problem with assigning one trustee to make sure that somebody is there all the time. But I think that the other trustees should be able to go to those meetings too, because the public likes to see the trustees there. I'll just.
I think
No,
Greg,
I
I think Greg had a comment. Well, go ahead, Greg.
I think you forgot me.
Well, it kind of started running on me.
I'm against the amendment to the motion. For several reasons. When we brought in this monthly honorarium, it was to cover the time we spend at home, working, bills, extra things that we do, as well as school council. I like the change to the 2 hours paid for the school council, but I'm against taking the $100 off. And again, I can only speak for myself hour-wise, but I'm going to give an example because the committees we're on. So this morning, I spent an hour reading the things you sent us. Last night, I worked reading over our policies and such. I spent a few hours on the weekend because of negotiations, looking at other contracts because of something that was brought up. We do a lot of work at home, and that was part, at least, of what this was for. To roll us back $100, no, totally against it because of the extra work outside of being here. And I'd also like to comment about what Clara said. I'm at a barbecue last Thursday, and when I'm at that barbecue, I'm not allowed, and I'm going to say it that way, to just go there and enjoy myself. I'm pulled aside, and this is parents' opportunity to tell me, unfortunately, usually it's complaining, it's really important that we're there at those barbecues or any other function like that. That's the opportunity for parents to talk to us. I can't speak for anybody else, but they look for us. Oh, there's the trustee. I've been waiting to talk to that trustee. It's a comfortable situation for them rather than making appointments with administration, talking with superintendent. That's an easy format for them, comfortable. And that monthly allowance that we're paid, remuneration, is for such things. And we've had this discussion. If some do more than others, that's all part of having salary. But to roll it back, I'm against it.
Okay, we have John and then we have Lori. Still speaking to the amendment.
Right, but then again, you're going to end up with the same situation that I just referred to. If you have two trustees attending a school council meeting, so one will get the per diem and one will get the honorarium. So you still are, although you are both there, the school assignment position that really sort of it presents itself as a situation of where you have one trustee getting, a per diem and one getting the honorarium, and it's not really fair to the trustee who is not getting the per diem. So once again, you have the situation of where you have two trustees at the same meeting, and and they're going to be paid on two different rates.
Lori, you wanted to say something?
The 10170 is captures trustees having two schools each, correct?
The 101 is recognizing
Two schools
two,
that you're
that's
attending
how it
two
was
school
calculated.
councils?
I don't know that it matters. the
Okay,
100.
I'm just in Ward 1 here, though. Most of the time, we only have one school each, and so then we're losing extra money for that. So I just have a little bit of confusion over that.
Okay, Brad.
So in fact, we're losing money because we have three schools, and you're saying the reverse, that because we have three schools and we're attending three school councils, and you have two trustees that are only assigned one school council, it's fine for you to get remunerated the way you are, but it's not, the reverse wouldn't be fine. So to average it out and reduce it but on an average, we don't want to reduce it, but to increase on an average, that's okay. So monthly, we're going to 3, and 2 trustees are going to 1, but when we did the reverse math on it, the previous remuneration committee looked at it, we're going to average it out for 2. That's what was used to justify that. And so when you look at that, it's a balance. It needs to be equitable, and I understand having one trustee getting paid there and one not. But that's the exception. The exception is having 2 trustees at. I know that having in your ward, it might occur more often because you have trustees living in town and they're only assigned that one school, so you might get another trustee easily attending. For us, we have 2 schools in our community where we live, but the rest aren't. And so Trustee McKee and myself, we do attend occasionally with both of us there because we want updates and we want, as Trustee Yeager said, we want the public to see us, and it's important for us to be there, but logistically, we can't because a lot of times they're on the same night. Last year, I had 3 school councils all on the same night, and I would go to 3 religiously. I would ask them to stagger it from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock start so I could show up late or early to the subsequent meeting. So it's hard, and we all work hard, and I get it. It's looking at it in a reduction. It's not perfect, but the way we're doing it now isn't equitable. It's not even close to equitable. We had trustees look back on our claim forms and our things. We had trustees not attending school council meeting for 3 months on consecutive occasions. So in saying that you're doing that in the 2-year term and people are getting remunerated for that and others aren't, I'm not okay with that.
Jim?
So I believe part of the optics of that are that I didn't put on my claim forms when I went to a parent council because I was assigned to be there and it was my honorarium. I put down the things that I had for per diem on my claim form. So, I mean, that could make me look like I wasn't there, but I was. And I also think that we need to take a look at, I mean, we're talking about you do more than me and I do more than you and everything else we beat around. This came into effect because we blew the doors off our budget 2 years ago. I believe we're inside our budget and it's working. And I believe that if we nitpick it to death, I think the way it sits right now is a good way to leave it. Next year, or in 2 years when we have the next election and the trustees, there's 3 in Claresholm and here, that's all gonna fix itself. And I just think that, there's always gonna be some inequity. I believe the important thing is that we make it simple enough so we stay inside our budgets and that we're responsible with the money that we're supposed to use. And so for that, I want to just leave it the way it is, keep it simple. I don't think that it's all that inequitable, and we'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay. Just before we move on, okay, we're speaking to the amendment, so I just want the amendment to be perfectly understood, okay? And so can we reduce the monthly honorarium for all trustees, just so we use the proper language, by $101.70, and move, so yeah, change that to honorarium, and move school council meetings right after council meetings for assigned trustees to the per diem honorarium. Okay, that is what we're talking about. Right, Brad? Okay, so we'll have a few more discussions on this, and then we'll move to Brad for closing so we can vote on the amendment itself. So we've got Lacey and then John.
I just wanted to clarify that we have a budget and we've always stayed well under the budget. And 2 years ago, we did not blow the doors off of our budget, but we were right at our budget, which we usually aim to be under it, and we have in the past, but we didn't blow the doors off of it. And we are all working to be under that budget again, which is why we wanted to look at the remuneration and make sure that we can bring that back down. But we did not blow the doors off it and go way over or anything.
Okay, John.
Or just some clarification on this again. So Brad is assigned to the Grantham School. If he can't make it and I attend the the school council meeting at the Grantham School, that means that I would get the per diem, or that means that, but it's not my assigned school.
No, but he's asked you to attend it on his behalf because he can't attend it.
But that says there a meeting for assigned trustees. Okay, so who?
If the assigned trustee can't make it, then it would be under
It
the
is
understanding.
okay, so it's still considered an assignment then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, just wait, Brad, you can close out in a
No,
second.
not to close out, just a point of clarification. It might be clearer if we say to assign trustee and or designate, because that way it's not
Okay,
clarifying that you're the assigned trustee, but nobody else is getting remuneration for it.
okay. Or designate, okay, Greg. Perfect. Okay, any further discussion? If not, we're gonna have Brad close on the amendment. Okay, Brad, please close.
Thank you. I appreciate all the discussion, and I know this is a hard topic because none of us do this for the compensation. We're all highly dedicated, and I appreciate the work that everybody does. But when I get concerns coming from trustees that as a board chair, that the assigned trustee isn't attending, and they're attending, and it's not equitable, I think that this is a good way to address that, and we can see some of those changes taking place. Not that somebody's going to attend, but for the remuneration, but if somebody is attending, like Trustee McKee covers for myself so graciously during this harvest time, I appreciate that, his willingness to do that. I would like to see the remuneration follow the trustee who's doing the work.
Okay, actually,
I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment.
okay,
I'd like to leave the honorarium or the per diem as is, but put down what Brad said about the school councils. Leave it, what he said, that we get paid for the school council.
just wait. So if we're getting too complicated, I would prefer that we vote on the amendment, and if you don't want the amendment, we defeat it and you propose a new amendment, if it's getting away from what Brad's trying to do. So just repeat to me again what you are looking to
All I'm
amend.
asking for the amendment to the amendment is that we don't take out the money that is put into the,
I think that's entirely changing the amendment, so we'll vote on this amendment and you can,
no, it isn't, because I'm leaving the second part in.
No, but it's changing the fact that he wants to reduce the honorarium. It's not compliant with the amendment. So I say that we vote on the amendment, and if you would like to bring a new amendment to the original motion based on that, then we can do that, because it'll be different than this motion.
In addition, it was after the call for
Close,
close,
yeah.
so.
That's fine. So we'll move forward with that. So I will call the question, well, not yet, just wait. So I want to ensure everybody understands what this amendment is saying. It's not that we're voting on the original motion. We're changing the motion. It's only the amendment. We'll still have to have another vote on the entire motion. So the amendment is that we reduce the monthly honorarium for all trustees by $101.70, equating to 2 hours, and move school council meetings for assigned trustees or designate to the per diem. That's what we're voting on. Everybody understand that? Okay. So if you vote in favor, the amendment stays. If you vote not in favor, the amendment is defeated. Okay, so I will call the question. All in favor of the amendment?
Just, sorry, just for clarification, it shouldn't read for 2 hours, it should be 2 hours times 2, because.
I would just take that amount out. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that, if that, because that,
Yeah,
our
how
2
you
hour rate,
calculated
yeah.
it doesn't matter. It's
Okay,
reducing
perfect.
it by 101.70.
That's clear, thank you.
Okay, so all in favor of the amendment? All opposed to the amendment? The amendment is defeated. So we were back at the original motion. Clara, did you want to make an amendment?
Sure, I'll try this amendment, and the amendment is to leave the, what do we call it, the
Proposal?
You're back to the original, so you just need to move that school council meeting first.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I guess we do. We take this, both the school council's meetings, and that you get paid for the school council meeting as assigned by the trustee or designate, yeah.
Okay, so the new proposed amendment is that we leave the remuneration as proposed, but that we move school council meetings for assigned trustees or designate to per diem, right? So there's no reduction, basically. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Clara, go ahead.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah.
We are going to school council meetings, we're being paid for them, and I think that's fair, because that really, at this point, will be equitable for everybody. But in leaving the honorariums, remember what we do is a lot more than just going to school council meetings, like was mentioned, we go to barbecues and everything else. And so we'll be paid for the mileage for that if this is passed, but this is all included in the honorarium, plus all the other things that are added on or that we put on this. So there is still a lot of things we go to at the school that is important.
Okay. Any other discussion by other trustees on this new amendment? If not, oh, sorry, Brad, go ahead.
While I agree with the intent of the amendment, I think that the part of the problem I see with this now is that it's an increase in the honorarium. So that's where I have trouble with it. If there was another way to reduce it, and even if it wasn't the full $101 amount, if it was a lesser amount, I'm not in favor of increasing the honorarium.
Okay, any additional discussion?
Yes, I would echo that too. I mean, I think I would like it to be as read, and
Okay.
I don't want to increase the overall amount that we're receiving either.
Okay, and thank you. Anybody else? Clara, do you want to close?
I do think the increase will be minimal for what we're doing, and it will compensate everybody in terms of what they're going to the meetings, and to make sure that, there's always, well, there is always somebody, but it would make things, at this point, equitable.
Okay, that is the closing comments. So the amendment as it stands is that we leave on, that we move school council meetings. You can take out leave honorarium. I would just say move school council meetings for assigned trustees or designate to the per diem. Understood? So if you're in favor of the motion, then that is the new amendment. If not, then it's defeated. So all those in favor of the amendment as proposed? All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed of the amendment? It is carried. So the new motion is that the Board of Trustees approve the proposed remuneration and move school council meetings for assigned trustees or designate to the per diem. That's the new motion. Anyone to speak to the new motion? Brad, go ahead.
Something else that was discussed at our committee of the whole meeting, as fun as this discussion is to have every year, was there any consideration, and I'd be willing to put forward the amendment that this be for the 2-year term, for the duration of our term, that we can tweak it if need be, but I would rather rubber stamp it in 2 years from now, a year from now, and not have this whole fun discussion. I think we've gone through this enough that we have it in a place where everyone's good with the system. It sounds like there's been a lot of good work done by the committee on this, so I think that I'd be willing to put forward an amendment that this be for 2 years, if that would be the desire of the board.
Okay, are you putting forward an amendment?
I'm just
the
floating.
motion?
At this time, I'm not committal on it because I don't want to debate it for 45 minutes. But if there is a desire from the board, I'd appreciate that, and I think that it shows our stakeholders that we're being fiscally responsible. That we want cost certainty with our remuneration for 2 years.
Okay, John had his hand up first, Clara. We'll go John and then Clara.
So I've gone through these reports here. It's called the budget. It's called the budget summaries, and I got them, and I have them for the last 3 years. So there, if you go back to 2016-17, the school board budget is around $242,000, and the next year for the 17-18, it was basically the same, somewhat different, 240,000. The year before was 242. That's very close. And I noticed that for this year, the 2018, well, I guess we're starting a new year now. For last year, it was 266,000, almost $267,000. So that's how it's been. I mean, I don't think like a year ago or 2 years ago we had a really inflated change to the trustees of remuneration. So I just thought I would clarify that.
Thank you. Clara?
We have to bring remuneration, or whatever you want to call it, it's in our policy that we have to approve this every year. So I don't know how this is, we'd have to change that part of it, or?
Chair, if I might.
That's one of the parts of the organizational meeting?
Yes, definitely. It's in the Education Act. It was in the School Act. That is part of our organizational meeting, but other jurisdictions and municipalities have set either a sliding grid or freeze or whatever have you. They've set up the term for multiple years, so they don't have to have this discussion. It still would be on our organizational meeting, but similar for a year from now, we're going to have an organizational meeting that really won't have a lot on it because our chair, our vice chair, and all our committees are 2-year terms. So technically, we will have an organizational meeting, but I would like to see us not have to go through this and discussion again.
Lacey?
Although I love the idea of not having to have these discussions, we're here to have the hard discussions. That's our job. And we are in a time right now where educational funding is very unclear. We don't know what type of funding we will be getting in the future, where the government's going to land on all these things. And to say that we're going to rubber stamp this year and go into maybe a hugely reduced budget next year and not be able to do what we can do as trustees to put more dollars back in the classroom, I just don't feel comfortable doing that. We're all doing our part, and if we need to have a tough discussion again next year, I'm all for it.
Greg?
I think it's important we look at it every year, and I think you're being fiscally responsible by looking at it every year. In case we've made mistakes or budgets change next year, I would just as soon we leave it the way it is.
John?
I think that, that through the whole process of the remuneration, we actually came out with some things that were very good. I think the aspect of assigning a trustee to a school, I mean, certainly has cut costs back. And of course, you know, the board here has been very frugal on the attending of the conferences and so forth. And I think we've done some wonderful things. Speaking on that again, like you're talking about, you know, about money being spent, like it's still from last year, I mean, from 2 years ago to last year, we still had an increase in our, in the trustee remuneration. So I'm kind of wondering, you know, like we're trying to cut back on all this. And of course, there could be several things that could account for a higher remuneration budget in last year. But I mean, I don't really think that we have saved a lot of money from last year to 2 years ago by really implementing all of these conditions that we have put upon the trustees.
Brad? Amendment, no amendment?
Hearing the comments, I think not. It wasn't to evade having a tough discussion. In fact, it would have froze and showed our public that we're intent on keeping those costs in, because even with the discussion today, there will be an increase. If this goes through, there will be an increase to trustee honorarium, which hasn't happened for 4 years since I've been on the board. So that wasn't the intent in doing it. So I won't put out the amendment at this time.
You are putting out the amendment?
won't.
Oh, you won't, okay. All right, so we are back at the original motion, or the amended motion that Clara had put forward. Actually,
We
who put
passed
forward
that.
who put
It's
forward the
passed.
original?
This is our motion.
The amendment passed, yeah. We're talking about the amended motion. Yeah, we did. Who?
Lacey.
Oh, Lacey originally. Okay, so Lacey will be the closing speaker to this new motion. Clara?
I just would like to point out is that this, what we are asking is not really an increase that much. Basically, it's the money that is coming out of our pockets already. When we drive to these events and things like that, which in a lot of cases we're not being compensated for. So in the long run, I don't think when we talk about an increase, it's not going to be a substantial or even a small increase. I think we're going to find it evens out in the long run. Thank you.
Okay. Final comments before we hand it over to Lacey to close? Okay, Lacey, you are closing remarks on the amended motion.
Okay, so I just want to say, like, we changed it last year. We went back, we tweaked it. We've had a lot of discussions about it, and I think we're in a good place now. So I hope that we can, pass this and everyone feels comfortable with it and see how it goes this year. But I think there's been some good work done.
Thank you. So we are voting on the motion that now says that the Board of Trustees approve the proposed remuneration and move school council meetings for assigned trustees or designate to the per diem. So whatever is in this document, there's one change, and that's the amended change of the school council meetings coming out of the monthly honorarium and that going into the per diem for the assigned trustee or designate. Everybody understands the motion? If so, I will call the question. All those in favor of the motion? All those opposed? That motion is carried. And we are done that item on our agenda. Okay, thank you for the discussion. We'll now move into the election portion of our meeting to elect our board chair. Prior to that, we always, in the event that we will have an election, we need individuals that can count the ballots. So I will need a motion from a trustee that the Board of Trustees appoint, and I'm going to recommend Chad and Richard as ballot counters. Is anybody willing to put forward that motion? Brad? We put them through an interview process to ensure they were capable of handling this. It was close. I'm not going to tell you which one was barely made it, but all those in favor of the ballot of that motion? Carried. Okay. So we will now move into the election portion of our chair. So I will call 3 times for interested trustees to put forward their name for the position of chair. Just hold off a minute. So the election process will go like this if we do have an election. We have stickies that we will give to all the trustees. They can write the name of the individual that they want to vote for. Chad and Richard will come around with this container. You'll put that into the container. They will go out of the room into the kitchen. They will vote, or they will count the votes, and they will bring back to me the individual that is elected. Okay, if we have a tie vote, okay, so depending on how many people there are to vote for, then we will put one back in for each of those individuals that are in a tie situation, and we will come back and have somebody independent pull one of those pieces of paper out, likely Carly, okay? Not to put her on the spot. But in the event of a tie, then that will be the way that we determine the...
Point of order. I was wondering, the whole point of drawing is not really a very democratic process. I think there should be another election if we have a tie vote. I don't like
Doesn't
leaving
it say
things
in
to
our-
chance.
It's in our policy, and we never changed it from the last time. We should have changed that. Yes, it's in the 2 years since the last time this happened. We should have.
I vote that we change it
Let's-
to rock, paper, scissors.
Let's just find that in our policy just to ensure that we're following. That's how I understood it as well.
Yeah, because we had to look it up last time. I don't have my book with me. I just remember from last time, Clara, that's what happened. Because we spent all that time looking it up, and it was questions, I think by yourself last time as well. That was, it was because everyone thought it was not an ideal situation last time that that had occurred. And we talked about changing it, and it didn't happen.
I don't know where it is in policy, but I do not remember this being in, it's not under the board operations, and
No, it's not.
unless Darrell remembers. I think it's something we're just questioning.
So I don't see it in the...
Is it under organizational, our policy for organizational meeting?
No,
It's not under organizational meeting.
Was it Robert's Rules of Order? There was something that we pulled up that was the,
I
because
don't-
it wasn't something that we just came up with on the
I don't
spot.
think it
Well-
would be under Robert's Rules of Order.
Maybe we can determine as a board the proper way to do it if we can't find it in the board policy. So Clara has put forward a motion to, I'm assuming you're putting forward a motion to have an additional vote if there's a tie vote?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion about that? Jim?
Yeah, I believe, I believe it's a good idea. I mean, we only have a problem if 3 people put their name forward. And then that's how you get a tie, right? 1 person out and
That's
2
right.
left over. And so I believe we're democratic
Okay.
and that we should vote. Remove the person who got the least amount of votes and vote again, and that will break the tie.
Right, there's no tie if the individual that got the most votes is by themselves, right? So,
Yeah.
and the tie below that. Okay, any other discussion before I call the question? So I'll call the question on that motion that we vote again in the event of a tie. All in favor? Perfect, that's carried. Okay, so that will be the process that we will use in the event of a tie. Okay? All right, so I will call, and is there any questions with regards to the process? Okay. I will make the first call for trustees interested in the position of chair. Lori, you would like to put your name forward for,
Yes, I'd like to put my name forward as chair.
okay. So you can write down Lori's name. I will make second call for position of chair. Jim, you'd like to put your name forward? So Jim Burdette. And of course, we can have 2 people in each call. It doesn't have to be that. But I will make the third and final call for interested trustees for chair. Clara. Brad, did I see your hand go up?
No,
No, okay.
I was,
You can speak.
at the final, okay, point of order. At the start of our meetings, similar to at the start of our ASBA meetings, similar to our board of meetings, it starts with a declaration of conflict of interest. Our own conflict of interest was modeled after that of ASBA, but it includes a phrase that is a little bit different to our own that I believe that we should consider. It asks everyone to disclose any conflict of interest or perceived conflict of interest, because a perceived conflict of interest can be just as detrimental to an organization as a letter of the law conflict of interest. I feel the possibility of having a chair with a family member working in central office as a director, at the very least, could be perceived as a conflict of interest. Being a member of the board in no way compares to being the chair and acting as the immediate supervisor for the superintendent, with such duties as approving vacation and holiday time, and along with the vice chair, negotiating superintendent's contract. The perception from staff and/or the public could be that of questioning the integrity of the board or superintendent and undermining the public trust with the family relations that are involved. As one of 7 members of the board, the risk of having any conflict of interest is minimal in comparison. I feel there is too much at stake for the board to recklessly make this decision that could affect our board or superintendent's effectiveness to do their roles and responsibilities and have it be called into question. As Stephen Covey said, nothing moves faster than the speed of trust. I have great respect for Trustee Burdette and his willingness to serve and share his leadership experience, but due to the reasons stated, I would ask that he be willing to withdraw his name for chair at this time. Thank you.
Okay, just a clarification on declaration of conflict of interest. That's an individual thing and they have to declare that, not somebody to declare it for them.
Yeah.
Okay. Jim, do you want to make a comment? Yeah. You'll get an opportunity to speak as to, if you don't, we'll remove your name later on as to why you'd be.
I really don't think that my son working for the school division puts me in a conflict as the chair. He's accountable to Daryl. He's not accountable to me.
He's actually accountable to me.
And he's accountable to you, and you're accountable to Daryl. And so we have no authority. I would be in no position to discuss his salary. He would be in no position to further my gain by being part of the school board. I mean, I don't think that there's a conflict of interest there. And I don't think there's a perceived conflict of interest. And I'll just leave it at that.
Greg?
If there's a perceived conflict of interest by any of the trustees, you won't vote for Jim. So I would just as soon, let's just leave it and vote
All right. We're going to move past that, and we have 3 individuals. Actually, this is not actually something we should be discussing. We should actually be giving individuals an opportunity to speak to their why they feel that they're the best candidate. There was no declaration of conflict voiced. Okay, so we'll just move on. So I will give time to all 3 of the candidates in alphabetical order by their last name to provide brief remarks as to why they are, well, I'll leave it at that, brief remarks. You can decide what you want to talk about. But so we have Burdette, Yegas, and Hodges. So we'll go with Burdette first, alphabetical order by last name, and then Lori, and then Clara. Okay. So you have a couple minutes, Jim.
I don't want a couple minutes, just brief is what we want to do. Anyway, I would like to be the chair because I think I could be a good leader. I think that we have a lot of things that we need to do. I believe that I have experience from past boards that help me with being able to be the chair. I really, I'm looking forward to this next 2 years and the things that we're going to do, and I would like to be the person who helps to lead us down that path. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Lori.
I've been vice chair for 2 years, and I've chaired many committees in zone, including Zone 6. I work hard, and I'm dedicated in supporting the board. I would love the opportunity to continue the great work that the board has done. I've been on this board for almost 8 years. I'm passionate about what I do, and I value us as a team. I have the time, and I'm organized and committed to do what needs to be done. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lori. Clara?
I thought long and hard about whether I was going to put my name forward for chair, but one of the things I think there are 3 basic things that we need as a chair. One of them is time. I have it. I mean, I'm retired right now, and I could devote the time. I don't have any other commitments unless I make them. Secondly is experience. I have a lot of experience, not only in terms of my teaching and my administrative part of it, but I've been on a lot of nonprofit boards and chair of a lot of nonprofit boards. So I have that experience in terms of chairing and leading. And the third one is the knowledge, and I have knowledge of policy, knowledge of Robert's Rules of Order, parliamentary procedure, I should say. And I think I carry that through a lot of things where I like to see it done. And I'd also like to talk about passion. I wouldn't be here right now sitting this up if I didn't have a passion for doing it. This is my 11th year as a board member, and I still feel that I really, really enjoy doing what I like, and I enjoy working with all the people. And I think I could work in a collaborative way that makes everybody feel that they have their say. So please vote for me.
Thank you, Trustee Yegas. We are passing around, take multiple, take more than one, in the event you need them for vice chair and so forth. And so take a moment to select who you would like to vote for, and fold that paper up, and Chad will come around and collect those. And then Richard and Chad will take them into the kitchen and count them.
Nice container. Looks like a big body of other.
No, not gonna sing. Maybe hum.